All right, now there are a lot of logistics to tax cuts, not the least of which is who starts the process. Typically, that's the House Ways and Means Committee. Kevin Brady, who chairs that committee, has been on this show many, many times. But there are concurrent plans that not only being drafted together in the South, but in the House itself, with the Freedom Caucus, that largely conservative group coming up with its own package that is irrespective of what is being done by House Ways and Means. Duplicative, could waste a lot of time. To House Freedom Caucus member Mark Sanford. Congressman, do you guys check on the progress of your plan versus their plan versus other plans? What do you do?
I think this is a story that's sort of gotten ahead of itself in that there is no Freedom Caucus plan at this point. I think that the group, in the wake of the health care debate, is going to come together and debate some principles. I think that, there's going to be engagement on this front. I think that what the group's ultimately about is trying to constructively engage at the front end of the debate as opposed to stopping things as we did on the health care debate so that we then sort of reorganize things and infuse some conservative ideals.
But are you saying, sir, just to be very, I'm sorry, Congressman, but to be clear, that you're not separately drafting a plan, that you might then look at whatever House Ways and Means has come up with or the details on what the blueprint out of the White House comes up with before you start tinkering or focusing on certain things that you like, certain things you don't like?
Correct. The Freedom Caucus really doesn't have the capacity that the Ways and Means Committee would have in actually going into the legislative text and creating a real bill.
But you could reject what they come up with as a group, just as you as a group rejected the initial health care plan that the Republican leadership was looking at. You're free to do that, obviously.
Correct, and that's why the group is wanting to constructively engage at the front end to say, let's have a conversation about territorial versus global tax. Let's have a conversation about full expensing. Let's have a conversation about the border adjustment tax.
Well, on the full expensing, are you in that camp, Congressman, that says these have to be paid for by the get-go? Revenue neutrality is one thing, but you want to make sure they're revenue neutral right away, and that you don't have deeper deficits before you get the revenue from these tax cuts.
I'm in no way speaking for the group, but
Understood.
My personal opinion would be that, and that is, a deficit is simply a delayed tax. It's simply handing it off the tax to our kids or to our grandkids, and I think it's important that we do what Kevin Brady and what I think the Speaker have tried to push for, which is a degree of revenue neutrality with regard to the tax plan overall.
All right, a degree of revenue neutrality. Almost everyone seems to think, using dynamic accounting, I don't want to get boring here, I do that quite easily on my own every day, but the argument is that it's going to create a lot of revenues down the road, but it's going to take away a lot of revenues at the beginning of the road. You seem to be saying, Congressman, you don't like that latter possibility.
That's correct, because I think that the age-old adage of Washington is, let's pay for it now and we'll worry about the expenses later, and I think that that's a model that's gotten us into real trouble, whether on from the standpoint of regular day expenses or really from the standpoint of tax expenses. So I say relatively neutral in that you could use dynamic scoring versus traditional scoring and look at some of the benefit that would come with a tax cut. But within that context, I think it's important to go for neutrality. Otherwise, you really are betting on the come, and it may or may not come in full force.
A border tax. How do you feel about that?
I personally am against it. I've heard, I represent the port in Charleston. We have a lot of product that goes in and out of this place, and you think about a border adjustment tax and how it would impact a whole host of businesses in the state or the southeast or frankly the country as a whole. I think that a border adjustment tax is in many ways a hidden value-added tax, and I think it opens up a whole new revenue source in the federal government's ability to collect money from its citizenry. So I'm going to be one of those folks that's going to be in the pushing in the right or wrong, depending on one's perspective, column against the border adjustment tax.
If this is a late fall development, which is increasingly looks like the case, I don't want to pin it to that. But there's a lot of back and forth on the health care thing, and the Senate has to come up with its own plan. Apparently, it's a separate plan from the House plan. Then they work out the differences. Let's say it's a full development on taxes. Do you think that those tax cuts should be retroactive to the beginning of the year?
My experience has been yes. The reason is, if not, you freeze up a lot of investment with people saying, well, I'll just wait till after the tax cut passes before I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. I think that ideally, and this has historically been the case with many tax provisions in the past, you may have to get retroactive to beginning of year. That way, in the year in question, you do not freeze up business activity.
All right. Interesting. Congressman, good catching up with you.
Yes, sir, as well.
All right. In the meantime,